presentation, I just want to confer you with immunity. You know, as you sit like we have sat now, you are protected under Cap 12 of the laws of Zambia, which grants members of parliament immunity against prosecution for what they say while in the house. This means that the information you give to this committee cannot be used against you outside parliament or indeed in any court of law for as long as it is factual. Deliberately or willfully mislead or misinform the committee, the same law can be used against you in the courts of law. I have no doubt in my mind, however, that this won't be necessary, as you won't choose to willfully mislead or misinform the committee. You may now proceed to make your submission.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Looking at time, we have got your memorandum, so we would ask you to just summarize it so that members will be able to have time to ask questions. Please.
We'll do so, Chair. In making our recommendations, we will cover the issues as follows. We will begin with giving a background, then we will give the current status of the death penalty in Zambia. We will consider international and regional instruments, domestic legislation. We will also do a brief comparative study. Then we'll give an overview of the implication of ratifying the protocol. Then we'll end with our findings and recommendations. So at page, unfortunately our document is not numbered, but and at page 4, we begin with our introduction and background. In summary, we note that Zambia is a state party to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which makes specific provision for the protection of the right to life. We further note that we, however, have not signed nor acceded to the optional protocol, which seeks to do away with the death penalty. So that, in sum, is what is discussed in our introduction and background. I'll move to page 7, where we consider the current status of the death penalty in Zambia, which is 2.0 of our submission. So here we note that Zambia has observed a moratorium from 1997. Successive presidents, beginning from His Excellency the late Frederick Chiluba, opted not to sign any death warrant, and most of them commuting death row prisoners to life imprisonment. We note a significant milestone in 2022, where His Excellency President Hakainde Hichilema commuted the death sentences of over 390 inmates to life imprisonment and went on further to abolish the death penalty in the Penal Code, which resulted in a number of consequential amendments doing away with the death penalty in various pieces of legislation. However, we note that the death penalty still remains in the Constitution. Under Article 12.1, we find that there's provision for circumstances when the right to life can be derogated from. I'll move on to the international instruments we considered on page 8. We considered a number of international instruments. We looked at the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the Maputo Protocol to the African Charter. We also looked at the Convention Against Torture. So as you may be aware, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is soft law, but some of its provisions have attained the status of customary international law and are therefore binding. Under this very important document, which applies to Zambia, we find in Article 3 the provision for the right to life, liberty, and the security of a person. Under this declaration, Zambia therefore should aspire to protecting this right. I'll move on to the next instrument on page 9, which is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Zambia is a party to this very important instrument. Article 6 of the Covenant provides that every human being has the inherent right to life. This right should be protected by law, and no one should be arbitrarily deprived the right to life. But the same covenant notes that in countries which have not abolished the death penalty, the sentences of death may be imposed only for the most heinous crimes in accordance with the national law. We also note that in the same instrument, we find that the sentence of death should not be imposed for crimes committed by persons below 18 years of age and should not be carried out on a pregnant woman. In a general comment by the Human Rights Committee on Article 6 of the Covenant, which I've been speaking to, which provides for the right to life, the committee strongly suggests that abolition is desirable. Further, the committee requires states to move towards the abolition of the death penalty. We also looked at Article 7 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. I'm at page 10, which protects both the dignity, physical and mental integrity of the individual. It is the duty of the state party to afford protection through legislative and other means to ensure the protection of this right. Therefore, maintaining the death penalty in the statute book is an affront to the enjoyment of this right. I'll move on to another instrument we considered, which is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Equally, this also protects the right to life under Article 4, where the right to life is enshrined as follows. Human beings are inviolable. Every human being shall be entitled to respect for his life and the integrity of his person. No one may be arbitrarily deprived of the right. We note on the African continent that almost all constitutions and other legal provisions provide for the protection of the right to life, with the pertinent derogations in their national law. We also considered the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which is the Maputo, commonly known as the Maputo Protocol, which protects the rights of women. So it seeks to promote equal rights and opportunities for women in all aspects of life. Under Article 4.1J of the protocol, we find that the protocol provides that every woman should be entitled to respect for her life and the integrity and security of her person. Further, the protocol stipulates that all forms of exploitation, cruel, inhuman or degrading punishment and treatment should be prohibited. These are measures of protection for women who are in custody, who are either pregnant or nursing. Zambia signed this protocol and is a party to it, and we find that we have actually a similar provision in our penal code under section 25(4), which provides, which gives a measure of protection for pregnant women from the death sentence for those who are found to be liable. We also considered the Convention Against Torture. Zambia is a party to this convention, and you may note that freedom from torture is a non-derogable right. Under Article 2 of the convention, state parties are urged to take effective legislative measures to prevent acts of torture. The UN Special Rapporteur on Torture called for the inclusion of capital punishment within the scope of international prohibitions on torture. Why? Because torture amounts to some form of deprivation. Torture would amount to some form of deprivation of life, where it results in a form of deprivation of life. It was observed that the death row phenomena encompasses a range of factors amounting to, among others, prolonged solitary confinement, anxiety caused by lengthy periods awaiting execution that produce severe mental and physical trauma for people on death row. Since the death row phenomenon relates to torture, the Human Rights Commission cited the Constitution of Zambia under Article 15, which provides that no person shall be subjected to torture. In our domestic legislation, we considered the Constitution, the Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure Code, and the Defense Act. As I had indicated earlier, the Constitution provides for the protection of the right to life. However, under Part 3, there are some derogations. Where a person is found guilty of murder, aggravated robbery, or treason, they will be automatically sentenced to death. Further, in our Constitution, we find under Article 5, in line with the Convention Against Torture, the Constitution prohibits torture, inhumane and degrading treatment, and guarantees freedom from such treatment without exceptions. We went on to consider the Penal Code at page 50. And I mentioned that in 2022, there was a landmark law reform where the Penal Code Amendment Bill number 23 of 22 was signed. The Penal Code prescribes the different types of punishments that courts may impose and provide for criminal offences and their corresponding penalties. So in 2022, the death penalty was banned. And accordingly, the sections which made to the death penalty in the Penal Code were amended to commute the death sentence to life imprisonment. This change in the Penal Code called for consequential amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code and the Defense Act at page 16. So under the Criminal Procedure Code, we found wherever the word death was found, this was deleted and replaced with the words life imprisonment. Under the Defense Act, which provides for the administration and regulation of Zambia Defense Force, we found the deletion of the word suffer death everywhere and with the replacement of life imprisonment. At page 16, we went into a comparative study. We considered 3 jurisdictions: the United Kingdom, Kenya, and Mozambique. In the United Kingdom, we found that they have specific laws which speak to the abolition of the death penalty. The first one, which was passed in 1965, which is the Murder Abolition of Death Penalty Act. We find that the UK has gone beyond mere abolition of murder to abolish the death penalty entirely, even for extreme crimes like treason and piracy. We also considered Kenya. Kenya has not abolished the death sentence, but has only outlawed its mandatory nature in cases of murder. Just like Zambia, Kenya has not ratified the second optional protocol, but it has made significant legal reforms that resonate with the principles of the protocol. Kenya has in this regard taken steps by reducing the number of death sentences and commuting many death sentences to life imprisonment. We also considered Mozambique, which departs from the position of Kenya and Zambia. Mozambique ratified the second optional protocol and abolished the death penalty in 1990 with the adoption of its new constitution. I'll skip part 7, which is the implication and obligations of ratifying the protocol, because these are spoken to on page 20, where we explain what happens, what the meaning of Zambia ratifying the protocol is. So this is provided for from page 20 to page 22. In conclusion, I'll go straight into the ZLDC findings and recommendations, and if you may allow me to read through these are on page 22. It was found that Zambia has already abolished the death penalty in its penal laws, reflecting a national stance against capital punishment. However, Article 12 of the Constitution of Zambia provides that no person should be deprived of his life intentionally except in execution of the sentence of a court in respect of a criminal offense under the law in Zambia of which he has been convicted. It is recommended that the death penalty must be repealed from Article 12 of the Constitution, which allows the imposition of the death penalty, as this will give effect to the enjoyment of the right to life without restriction. 2. It was found that Zambia is a party to the International Covenant on Civil Political Rights and has committed to upholding civil and political rights, including the right to life. However, without ratifying the second optional protocol, there is a gap between Zambia's domestic legal framework and its international obligations. It is recommended that, given that Zambia has already abolished the death penalty in its penal laws, ratifying the second optional protocol would bring its international obligations in line with its national legal framework. This action would send a clear message that Zambia is dedicated to human rights and the preservation of life. 3. It was found that the death row phenomenon relating to torture as highlighted by the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights. However, Zambia has no specific legislation addressing torture to protect human rights. It is recommended that Zambia should enact legislation specifically addressing the protection against torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. It was found that while Zambia has not fully abolished the death penalty, comparison with nations like the UK, which has achieved total abolition, highlights the potential for a shift in Zambia's legal framework towards human rights protection and the alignment with the international standards. It is recommended that, based on the experiences of countries like Mozambique, which successfully abolished the death penalty through constitutional reform, Zambia can create a comprehensive legal framework that prioritizes the right to life and aligns with global human rights standards. I submit.
Thank you, our witness, for the presentation. Honourable members, I think now we can ask questions for clarity, or I think as honourable members are still contemplating, I just want to look at your recommendation on page 22. 1, where I say it is recommended that number 8, second paragraph. We are saying it is recommended that the death penalty must be repealed from Article 12 of the Constitution, which allows the imposition of the death penalty, as this will give effect to the enjoyment of the human rights to life without restriction. Now, if you look at this same protocol that we are trying to accede to, I think it has got some exceptions. Whereas except where huge war crime have been there, it has exceptions. But here in our constitution, we are saying we don't need this exception by deleting everything. So are we looking at are we having some consistency with what we are want to bring on board and what we have?
Okay, I'll attend to that one. It's not necessarily an inconsistency. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights protects the right to life, but it's a proviso. It states that in the event that the national laws allow for the death penalty, it should be in situations where heinous crimes have been committed and not any other crime. When you look at our report, from the comments we saw made by the Special Rapporteurs and the Human Rights Committee, which made submissions on Article 6 on the right to life, state parties are encouraged to actually move towards abolition of the death penalty. And the alternative then would be to provide for life sentences as an alternative, and also rehabilitate.
Talking about heinous, killings, which is mass killings. Here someone, they just stands up and starts shooting people carelessly, maybe killing 100 or so people. How would you attend to that in comparison with what the international world wants and the abolition of the law?
It's a serious and very valid concern, but yes. So from our research findings, it has been found that the death penalty hasn't actually served as the deterrent it was meant to be. We even see more heinous cases of murder. We even see younger children killing. So what we should be looking at is how can we actually preserve the life of people and ensure that people respect each other's rights even to life. So as indicated, we should look at other ways of seeing that we rehabilitate and find other ways of deterring. The death penalty, as stiff as it is, clearly hasn't been working as a deterrent.
Go ahead, Honorable.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. You people are the learned. You are indicating through this second protocol that if the Constitution is not amended, that Article 12 sub 1 is not amended so that it matches with the second protocol, because the second protocol has a reservation that except in extreme situations. So why didn't the countries rise against that reservation which is in the second protocol? Thank you, Honorable Chair.
You can go ahead to respond to that.
Okay. I think it would pose a challenge, especially at the point where we are at now. We have made the necessary changes in our penal code. We've made the necessary changes, the consequential changes in our Defense Act, in our Criminal Procedure Code. If we leave the Constitution as it is, we will remain inconsistent, because in one hand, we are saying we have done away with the death penalty in our penal laws, but on the other hand, the Constitution empowers Parliament to come up with laws which allow for the death penalty. The law generally should be certain. So if we have such provisions, there will be no certainty in our laws. It will depend on the goodwill of whichever regime is there. If they are pro-life, then you see that there will be no laws which will be enacted which allow for the death penalty. But if they are not pro-life, then the law will change accordingly. So it goes against generally even just good principles of drafting laws. The laws should be clear, should be certain. People should know that if I do this, this is what will happen to me. And it shouldn't be dependent on who the leaders are at the time.
So, what should we do with those who commit those heinous crimes or which previously attracted murder? What should we do with them?
As we have been doing from 1997, we can commute to life imprisonment.
Stop, or it will just increase the murder cases?
That one is hard to answer, but what we can say with certainty is the death penalty hasn't been a deterrent.
Okay. How are we going to deal with the public? Because the public...
Through the chair.
The public is interested in the death penalty. Them, they have consistently voted for the death penalty. So they would want to see it retained. So are you willing to go there and stand on the cross to face the public?
At the end of the day, the law should be reflective of the social, political, economic values of the people. But again, that should be balanced against our human rights obligations as a state. So we would have to find a balance somehow.
If we don't get it, we have to get it through the referendum. If we don't get it, what do we do?
Unfortunately, as you're saying, it can only be done through the referendum. These are enshrined rights, and the current position is we would have to go that way if we are to make any changes to the Constitution. So for now, that inconsistency will remain until we change the constitution, until we hold a referendum with our thresholds.
Got a question?
You got a question? Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. I've got
Chairman, before you go ahead with the closing remarks. Madam, I'm trying to, I'm not a prophet, but I just want to ask you a question. You know, each regime of government comes with its own challenges. And you know, you might not know what happens anywhere, and God forbid that this can happen to Zambia. Okay, well, because we are saying, okay, we remove this. I know it's a collective responsibility, but well, you have one man wakes up today, not the way we were saying about shooting out people. He just wants to kill, just to massacre people. Then that person cannot be reformed, and we say, oh, the law does not permit us to execute this person. What happened in that case? Thank you, Chair.
You can go ahead.
What happens in that case where someone does not want to reform? If I got the question correctly?
Yeah, what I mean is, it's very difficult to come up with question because like, you've got a situation, a scenario. Let me put the scenario. Then you arrest a few for the masterminders of such an act. Then we say, oh, you go to your penal codes, you go to your constitution, these people should be just put in life imprisonment. And what will happen in that imprisonment is going to be a lot of fracas. Or outside here, people are not going to forget that thing because they still feel it, and this guy is still there, this person is still there. So my question is, if we do this, then we find in that thing, unlikely thing which cannot, maybe for our country, I know it cannot happen. Maybe in the future when we are all dead, such a thing happens. What do you think should be done?
No, if it's aimed at the law, but I'll try my best to respond to it, looking at our laws, our values as Zambian people. In our very own constitution, we call ourselves a Christian nation, isn't it? And meaning that we subscribe to Christian values, and our 10 commandments provide that thou shalt not kill. So if we are going by our constitution and what is provided outside emotions and what the public sentiments at the time, and if we're sticking with the law provides that we observe these Christian values, and further our penal laws do away with the death penalty in support of these Christian values, then the law would stand if we're just to observe the law void of human emotions at the time.
It's interesting. It's very interesting. I think looking at time, I think would spare you. We've had a number of questions or concerns, being highlighted, and we wouldn't want to keep you longer. I want just to thank you for your presence and your submission, and I will make use of it. But before I release you, I think I would want to withdraw the minute that I conferred on you, so that as you go without the 7 minutes. Otherwise, we'll call again. We thank you.